All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We have a quorum, it appears. So again, welcome to the February 24th, 2022 California Water Quality Monitoring Council meeting. I just want to take a minute to a quick land and water acknowledgement. The Water Monitoring Council recognizes each tribe's unique sovereign status, culture, history, environmental and water concerns, and each tribe's historic knowledge and experience managing California's water resources. These sovereign people have been stewards of the land since time immemorial. Nearly 200 tribal nations are located within the modern borders of California, more than any other state in the United States. You can learn more about the land that you are currently working on. I myself am up in California, Sacramento, West Sacramento area on the historic lands of the Miwok peoples. And I will hand it off to Karen after a quick, this meeting is being recorded, so please mute your mics. If you are comfortable being on camera, especially when you're speaking, that'd be great. I'll do a quick roll call for the council members. If you are not a council member, but are joining us, welcome. Please just go ahead and in the participant list, make sure your name is clear and who you're affiliated with, and I can keep that documented on our end to make sure that we capture your participation. So quickly, the council chair representing Cali, PA.
Here, Karen Mogus.
Great. Council chair representing the Natural Resources Agency, Mark here. Mark might be a little bit late, and I know Chad is not going to make it today, so they're not here quite yet. Drinking water program.
Good morning, Andrew Altavogt, Assistant Deputy Director, Division of Drinking Water.
Morning, Andrew. We need to touch base too about your alternate. I know Betsy retired. Public health.
Hey, good morning, Mark Starr, Deputy Director for Environmental Health in the Department of Public Health.
Welcome, Mark. Thank you. Regulated community, publicly owned treatment works.
Good morning. I'm Lorianne Fono, Bay Area Clean Water Agency's Executive Director.
Welcome, Lorianne. Thank you.
Hi, Nick.
Hi. Regulated community stormwater. Grant.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Grant Sharp with Orange County Public Works, representing the regulated stormwater community.
Thanks, Grant. And agriculture. I guess I'm marked on there.
Yes, good morning. It's Mark Cady from California Department of Food and Agriculture.
Hey, good morning, Mark. Community monitoring groups. I know Helen and Mary Ann are both unavailable, so I'll go ahead and move on to the public. Ray.
Good morning, everybody. Ray Heimstra, Associate Director at Orange County Housekeeping, representing the public.
Hi, Ray. And scientific community, non-academic. Steve here, or Ken. I think they'll be joining us later. And then the scientific community academic member.
Hi, I'm Krista Kamer. I'm the director of the California State University Council on Ocean Affairs, Science and Technology.
Hi, good morning, Krista. And water supply.
Good morning. This is Peter Vroom, Deputy Director of San Diego Public Utilities, representing the water supply community.
Morning, Peter.
Morning.
Last but not least, the US EPA liaison, non-voting.
Hi, this is Terry Fleming, the EPA Region 9. I'm the Water Quality Standards Coordinator.
Morning. And with that, I will hand it over to Karen to do quick, unless you want me to keep going.
I'm happy to go over the agenda.
Okay, great.
And see if there's any comments. We'll start off with what we already are, a little housekeeping and introductions. Then we'll move to public forum for anyone that has joined us that would like to address the council on an item that's not already on the agenda. Item 3 will be announcements and updates from the council membership and from our executive or our director, Nick Martirano. Then we will move to an update on our briefing that we had with the secretaries of Cal EPA and the Natural Resources Agency back in January on the 14th. Item 5 is an update from the wastewater-based surveillance subcommittee. Then item 6 is evaluating the effects of flow alteration, an update on a development of flow recommendations for South Orange County watersheds. Then we'll get a presentation from another of our work group leads, the CCHAB network. And finally, we'll round out the morning with a conversation about planning for the next agenda. Any additions or adjustments to the agenda anyone wants to see? And Nick, I can only see you and me. I don't see hands. So
Thanks. Yeah, if you could raise your hand if you have, or forever hold your peace within the participants, and I'll keep an eye on it. Not seeing any.
all right, do you want to go over action items?
Sure. I went ahead and circulated the action items 2 weeks ago for review and feedback. I did not receive any. We did a great job this time in hitting our action items. They were really focused primarily on the agency secretary briefing, putting together a subcommittee on that topic, getting the work groups coordinated, and then briefing the secretaries around there. So at this point, they are final and they're posted on the council website under the meetings tab from November 10th. So those are final. And with that, we can move on to item 2, public forum. And again, if you are a member from the public that wants to speak to the council on anything not on the agenda, feel free to raise your hand and we can hand you the floor. And if you don't have the ability to raise your hand, then just politely speak up. Okay. Oh, I see Andrew. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just one quick thing, which is I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that the second iteration of our drinking water needs assessment is currently in process. We had a workshop a couple weeks ago, and we're in the process of soliciting public comment on that. And we're hoping to release this next iteration of it in April. So this is focusing on the risk assessment for public water systems. There's some changes in the risk factors there that folks may want to take a look at, and also we're looking at some of the costs associated with water systems complying with drought and some of the requirements there. So I just want to make sure folks are aware of that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I'll go ahead and consider that part of your update for the next item. I didn't see anybody from the public, so we'll go ahead and move on to item 3, council member and director updates. I'll go ahead and go with the council member updates and maybe start from the bottom up. I'll start with EPA. Does EPA have any announcements? Oh, circle back to you, Mark. Or do you want to speak now?
I have no
you
announcements.
you can start with EPA. Go, Terry.
Okay. Okay.
I have no announcements.
Okay, great. Peter, do you have any announcements?
Yeah, I have a couple things for today. So about the JEDI working group, last council meeting, you might remember that we kind of revised some of the goals and projects a little bit. Since that time, we've also completed a draft charter that will hopefully be reviewed by the overall work group in the near future. About a month ago, Nick sent out an email to solicit interest and provided information of how to join the group's listserv. And he also included information to contact me if people were interested in volunteering to be co-chairs for the group. So far, I have received one self-nomination for somebody who is interested in being co-chair. Nick, I was actually wondering if it would be worthwhile sending out another email before the end of the month, just reminding people if they're interested to send me their bios, and then I'll send them out to everybody on the listserv for consideration before the first meeting, which will hopefully be scheduled for sometime in the next month or so. We have 93 people that have joined the JEDI listserv. So obviously there's a lot of interest, and I'm excited to see how things progress. I also attended the Safe to Eat work group meeting on January 26th, where they presented updates of several of their various ongoing projects. They discussed charter updates that they've been making, and then they focused the majority of their discussion on priorities for 2022 through 2024. There was a little bit of discussion over how to allocate limited funding amongst several of the projects, but I think that in the end they generally arrived at consensus. And that's pretty much my updates for the time being.
Thanks, Peter. And yes, we can definitely send out a reminder email.
Thank you.
Krista, anything to update the council on?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe Steve, have you joined? Okay. Ray, anything to update?
Yeah, just a quick update. Thanks to Nick for connecting me with someone that we're discussing being my alternate, and still working on that. That's my only update for now.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Helen's not here. Mark, anything to report? Mark Katie?
Thanks. I have nothing to report right now.
Thanks. Grant?
Yeah, just a quick announcement that the next quarterly meeting of the California Stormwater Quality Association will be in April on the 7th, April 7th. It's going to be another virtual meeting, and the focus is going to be on wildfires and water quality. And Brian Lawrenson is also on the call this morning. I don't know, Brian, if you have any updates that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I don't have any updates. Thanks, Grant.
Thanks, Grant. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, Grant, can you give us a little more detail on that? That is sort of a pet peeve interest of mine. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. And if you can make sure that I get sent an invite, I'd be greatly appreciative, because
Sure.
As Karen and Nick know, I've been raising concerns about this issue for quite some time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't seen a copy of the draft agenda for that meeting, Mark, so I don't have details to share, but I promise you, as soon as they're available, I'll make sure that I can share them with Nick and he can pass them along to everyone. I can also ask Karen Cowan, who is the executive director of CASQA, to maybe fill you in on any details. I'm sure she probably is working behind the scenes to fill out the agenda for that meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure.
And Mark, this is Brian. Just to clarify, are you interested in participating in a panel or something like that, or just want to follow it?
No, I just want to follow it. We're really trying to figure out, I mean, just being really straight with everybody, which is always risky with 35 people, is that, we just don't do this in a systematic way. And so the potential harm that's being caused to multiple beneficial uses is just not being adequately assessed. And this is exactly why we exist here in this group, is, how do we make that happen? And we're seeing so much money going towards wildfire management, correctly so, because of the harm that's caused and risk to harm to public health, property, and life. but the monitoring side of it is just, it's really haphazard and there's just no systematic approach. So we really want to learn from it and sort of figure out based on that what we can maybe make as strong recommendations.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Lorian.
So first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Sam Choi from OC Sanitary District as the proposed alternate for the POTW sector. He brings geographic diversity to our representation, since I'm NorCal and he's Southern California. My background's chemistry and his is biology. So I think that based on his experience, he'd be an excellent addition as an alternate. So I'm not sure exactly what the process is for approving alternates, but we'd like to move forward with that.
Yeah, he is. It's completely on you to nominate your alternate and approve him. So that as far as we are concerned, he is your alternate. He's more than qualified. I added him to the membership pages, so he is there. I don't know if Sam, would you like to say anything? Or is he just...
Yeah, thank you, Lorian, for that introduction, and thanks, Nick. So I just wanted to say hello to the council, and I really look forward to serving in this role. And yeah, I mean, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Welcome. Thanks, Lorian.
Okay, and the second thing I wanted to mention is a quick rundown of our sector's progress on the various PFAS monitoring studies that we're engaged in. So most of the state is wrapping up PFAS monitoring and influent, effluent, and biosolids that's required by their investigative orders. Generated a lot of data, as you can imagine. And CASA, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies, is leading an analysis of that data with consultant support to see if any conclusions can be drawn about significant relationships between PFAS, analytes, and total loads, and service area characteristics, treatment technologies, and any other meaning that we can glean from the data. And in the meantime, BACWA, or in Region 2, we have a special study that's separate from the statewide investigative order. And we are going to be focusing on in phase 2, which is kicking off now, and looking upstream in sewer sheds. So looking at specific industrial and commercial users, as well as sub-sewer sheds that are purely residential, to see what the signal from that is. So looking forward to giving more updates in the future on the results of these studies.
Thanks, Lorian. Karen, it looked like you had a follow-up, or?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Lorian, for that. I also wanted to mention that my staff are going to be, and Division of Drinking Water will be presenting a joint information item on the results of the PFAS investigative orders to our board at their board meeting on April 5th. We should make sure that that's correct date. It's the first board meeting in April. Yeah, April 5th. So if you're interested in getting an overview of the data that we've gotten across all of our sector investigative orders, we'll be presenting that before our board then.
Great. Thank you. Mark Starr. Got so many Marks now.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks, Nick. I had a couple quick updates just from hearing my first time at this with this group. So I have a couple things hopefully will be of interest. One is our involvement with wastewater surveillance, which I will leave that to the update from the subcommittee by Josh in a little bit. But it's certainly been an important complement to our surveillance tools in public health for COVID, and something that we hope to be able to use for other pathogens, as well as, in fact, we're doing some work with that already, and that has been done in the past with other pathogens like polio, but also with other public health targets of interest in wastewater. For example, certain drugs such as opioids or antimicrobials, resistance genes, things like that. So anyway, it's really exciting area of development, and we're really making the most of it with COVID right now. And the Omicron variant really was a showcase of the value of this surveillance tool. So really thanks to the water board who helped kick this off, to Mark Gold, who called me up after a meeting and said, what's going on with this? And so that all led to lots of other things that where we are today. And then just hearing about JEDI, I just want to let you know our agency, also the Health and Human Services Agency, Cal HHS, has a JEDI committee of our own, subcommittee within our agency, and has been working mostly internal within the agency, but working on producing an equity dashboard and an equity plan and guide that would cross the agency. Many of the departments have things like that already, especially ours in public health. But just in case that's of interest and if connections would be helpful at some point, let me know. The last thing I was going to mention is I don't know how familiar you all are with what's called the One Health approach to solving complex or wicked public health problems, things that cross sectors and domains. And there's been a lot of recent activity with ASTO, which is the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, ECOS, which is the Environmental Council of States, EPA, and also the Association of Fish and Wildlife agencies. And so a little background on One Health, if you don't know, it's an approach to these complex problems that affect humans, animals, and the environment, things that can't really be solved by just say only us in the human health sector and public health trying to tackle. There's some great examples that one of them is on the agenda today, which harmful algal blooms, has impact across all three domains, human, animal, and environmental. And we can't really address harmful algal blooms' potential impacts to people without really engaging systematically across those domains. So that's kind of the rationale for this One Health approach. It was really pushed starting in the early 2000s by the American Veterinary Medical Association. I'm a veterinarian, so I've been involved with that for some time. And a resolution between AVMA, AMA, the American Medical Association, and the American Public Health Association kind of kicked off the One Health Initiative and the One Health Commission. And I'll put the web link for that if you want more information in the chat. But the focus has primarily been on zoonotic diseases, transmissible and shareable between people and animals. So things like COVID, things like Ebola, they have an environmental component, they have an animal component, they have a human component. But what's happened recently is a strong interest in the environmental leg of that triad, even stronger than just environmental aspects of infectious diseases, but also many others that involve toxins or, as I mentioned, harmful algal blooms. Antimicrobial resistance is a good example, and resistance genes and impacts to the environment, maybe resistance developing in the environment when there's discharges of antimicrobials, things like that. And of course, many of the impacts of climate change, whether it's drought or fires that Mark just talked about, water quality impacts from fires, these are all kind of One Health challenges. And as you just said, Mark, a more systematic approach can be helpful. So that's what One Health is about. There's been several, a couple webinars and a workshop, and now there's what's called a One Health community of practice that's being led by these environmental and public health organizations that I mentioned. And so that's just getting off. We just had our first meeting of the community of practice yesterday. So I just want to let you know about that. And as problems evolve, and if anything is helpful for that to apply a One Health approach, I think this kind of group is a One Health group from my perspective, and why I was excited to be able to join it, to be able to have some impacts on improving human health, environmental health, and animal health. So I'll stop there, and I'll put that link in the chat, the One Health Commission, if you want to learn more about One Health and the approach. And full disclosure, I'm on the One Health Commission's Council of Advisors, so I certainly have a stake in the game here. Thanks.
Yes. Thanks, Mark. That's great. Great update. I also wanted, did you want to introduce David as your alternate?
Yeah, I don't think he's on the meeting today, is he?
I don't know, but I just to say.
But yeah, so Dr. Dave Mazzara is the head of our Food and Drug Safety Division in the Department of Public Health. And he has agreed to be my alternate for this group. In addition to food and drug safety, he's got a background with the drinking water program when it was in CDPH before it moved to the water board, and PhD in environmental science, I think, emergency preparedness background. So he's got quite a cross sector of skills and background that are relevant for this group. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Andrew, did you have anything to add beyond the safer update? I don't think so. All right, Mark, you've been waiting patiently. Mark Gold.
Yeah, not my strength. So we had a really big day yesterday at the Ocean Protection Council. We approved the microplastic strategy for the state, and big thanks to the State Water Board for, Scott Coffin in particular was invaluable in helping us put that together. There's a very large monitoring component and research component of the strategy. And so one of the things that we'll be doing at the OPC, hopefully by the end of the year, is funding efforts to standardize basically water quality analytical methods for microplastics. So hopefully everybody's using the same sorts of methods. I know that's an area SQUIRP in particular is very, very, very engaged in. And we also want to put together, in essence, like a model monitoring program for the state on microplastics, and do that also by the end of the year. So this will be separate from what I talked a little bit about last time, which is we do want to also fund a much larger scale model monitoring program for coast and ocean for the state. But microplastics, we're going to move much more quickly in regards there. So there'll be some funding opportunities coming up soon, partnership opportunities coming up soon on microplastics. So that's pretty exciting, and we're the first state in the nation to do this, and probably the first state or nation to do this in the world. So it's a new deal, and it's really understanding that the scope and scale of the microplastics problem is just growing exponentially, and we have to start doing stuff on it. So I can't remember the exact number. I think there's 40 different actions that are part of that document. Related to this, but not on the water quality side, but another big thing that happened yesterday was that we had for state agencies, a sea level rise action plan was also announced. We didn't have formal adoption. It's going to be reviewed really at any department or agency that wants to present it publicly. We're hoping to get as much public comment as possible. It builds on the sea level rise principles that we developed with 17 different agencies about a year and a half ago. And this document was also put together by 17 different agencies, as well as reviewed by the governor's office and Department of Finance. So it actually got through that gauntlet, if you can believe it. And so that's now available also on our website. If if some of you I know are in the infrastructure business, and so really having a better understanding of how we're looking at how do we build coastal resilience in the state of California, there's a ton in there. In that case, there's 80 different recommendations, of which 20 were identified as critical. Probably would have been more than that if all the items in there were funded, but quite a few of them need additional funding. And then the last thing that happened that's also of interest to this group is we funded jointly with Sea Grant, but I think 2.7 million of the dollars were from us, a number of studies on ocean acidification and hypoxia. And we've been doing a lot of that, as you know, over the last decade, but especially we've ramped that up in the last 2 years. We set up a subcommittee to really identify what we needed to do on monitoring on ocean acidification hypoxia for the state. And we've been implementing the recommendations of that Blue Ribbon Task Force and what they recommended about a year ago in a number of different ways. And so we earlier, about 6 months ago, funded 5 different agencies to fill all sorts of monitoring gaps for the state of California. This funding effort was a little bit more research oriented, but there were two things I just want to highlight. One was Humboldt State got an award to do a lot of ocean acidification work. And that's going to also fill some of the geographic gaps that we have on North Coast OAH monitoring. So I think that's going to be really helpful as well. And then also SENCUS received funding to sort of create a data hub to pull together all the ocean acidification and hypoxia data that we have for California, both existing and new data, and hopefully help develop some user-friendly data products for people to use to have access to that data in a way that might be easy for them to use. So those are the big announcements on what happened yesterday. So it was a really big meeting for us, and I'll stop there and glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Mark.
Thanks.
All right, is the microplastic strategy, I assume they're going to be hopefully working with the subcommittee that Scott's leading under the council to help implement some of those action plans. I think that's pretty exciting. As far as you mentioned SENCUS and bringing together the data, is there a time frame that you know off the top of your head when that deliverable would be put into place? The user-friendly dashboard or whatever?
I'll check up on that. My guess is it's probably 2 years. I mean, any sort of grant of that scale is going to be a 2-year grant.
Great. And then, yeah, if you want to send me the action plan, I can broadcast that to our listeners to get you some comments and share it with the council members too, so that they can share it with their sectors if you're.
Great. And I hope everybody got I mean, we felt like we sent the microplastic strategy to everyone and their siblings to get comments, and we got like 120 comments from 200 people or so. So, I mean, we really did get a ton of comments, and a lot of it was really supportive. A lot of it was helpful, and it really strengthened the document. So I do appreciate all the help that we got, and especially the collaborative partnerships with all the state agencies. That was, really a big deal on making the document a lot better, as well as the scientific community and SQUIRP and SFEI. I mean, really everybody had a hand in putting it together.
Any questions for Mark? All right, Karen, thanks, Mark.
I don't have any other announcements other than what I already provided earlier.
Great. Sorry, Sam, I missed your hand. Did you have something?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Just wanted to say, Mark and the OPC, thank you for all your efforts on microplastics. On behalf of CASA, I just wanted to mention that we're supporting all the efforts on the microplastics, and wanted to mention that in response to the microplastic strategy, we're developing 2 prospective research projects to provide greater accuracy, efficiency, and clarity to the anticipated monitoring of microplastics in wastewater, specifically effluent and biosolid samples. So there's 2 projects. The first one is looking at the sampling, and we recently through OPC and SQUIRP leading the efforts, we piloted a project where we looked at the AST and microplastic sampling strategy, and from the lessons learned, we're planning to look at the auto samplers, which is the most commonly used at wastewater agencies, to see if we can get comparable results. And then the second project is to compare, through the University of Pacific, compare FTIR with pyrolysis GCMS to see if that could be another method that could be used, again, from some of the lessons learned with FTIR. So I just wanted to share that with you, that we're supporting the microplastics efforts through those 2 proposed projects. And that's it. Thank you.
Great to hear.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, great. Oh, my updates. So the first update I'm going to talk about is the California Water Data Challenge. So the Office of Information Management Analysis of the Water Board, which is the office I work for, is taking a lead partner role in the development of this year's California Water Data Challenge. And I am helping Greg Gearhart and Anna Holder develop things like the challenge questions and the rollout process this time. We're working still closely with the Big West Data Innovation Hub and UC Berkeley, and are hoping to bring in some new partnerships from the Water Data Consortium to help make this challenge a really big success. The plan now is to leverage some of our existing efforts. One that's coming up is the March is Water Data Month, which is led by the water boards, and you'll be seeing some announcements coming up in the next week or so, since March is right around the corner, about kind of a visit day, get people thinking about data visualizations, and we'll be introducing the idea of the Water Data Challenge, and the bigger kickoff event that we'll be leveraging is the Water Data Symposium, which, if you're not aware, is an annual event that we've been partnering with the water board with. We, the council, that is, has been partnering with the water board to develop, which really highlights what's going on in the water data monitoring sphere, as well as bringing in some larger community-based partners to voice their concerns and voice what challenges they are facing. This year, we're planning to leverage the symposium to really focus on the Water Data Challenge. And those that aren't familiar with what the Water Data Challenge is, it's really a set of challenge questions that are broadcast by the state. These are challenges we are facing, recognizing that we don't have a lot of the data science resources that are out there in the private sector or in the even the academic sectors. And there is monetary awards that are associated with the challenges, and basically the challenge questions are posed. Teams come together. There are sponsors or partners that have like sub teams or sub topics underneath the challenge question that kind of make a pitch to these teams, like, oh, here's, for example, we met with our tribal coordinator, Adriana Renteria, the other day, and she was interested in looking at tribal reservation data and overlaying that with mobile home parks and drinking water supply wells, and trying to figure out, where is there overlaps. So that's kind of an example of what a question might be. And then if this is of interest to a team of data scientists, they would try to provide an answer to that question at the end. And the challenge generally runs from 6 to 8 months, and then they submit their final projects, and then we vote on those and then provide monetary awards, and generally in the range of a couple $1,000s. So it's a good way to attract emerging talent as well as existing talent. And there's really some really great projects that have come out in the past events. Being that we're taking a larger role at this time, we are really trying to emphasize utilizing the data that the water board specifically has been published on the Open Water Data portal, and making that, elevating those and hopefully putting them to use, both in identifying not only what the data is telling us, but also what the gaps exist. So gap analysis is a big portion of it. And we're also trying to develop questions with a specific racial equity lens, being that that's a big part of what our office has been working on, as of importance to the water board as well. The symposium and challenge kickoff are currently planned for the end of June. We're thinking about a 2-day event, so June 28th and 29th. Day one would be more of a classic symposium type of event, where we would have presentations and showcase the work that's being done by Swamp and our partners, as well as other community-based organizations across the state, and then kind of get the creative juices flowing. And then day two would be more focused on coalescing teams and allowing some of our sponsors to pitch their specific topics that they would hope that teams kind of get excited about and decide that they want to focus on. So that's the Water Data Challenge. Another key topic is this congressional caucus. So the beginning of this year, U.S. Congressman Ted Lieu and Congresswoman Julia Brownley's office reached out to me and the council for information regarding what we and our work groups are doing relative to coastal issues in California. They have both Congressman Liu and Congresswoman Brownlee have created a California Coastal Caucus within the U.S. House of Representatives, and they co-chair that effort. So we are meeting with their staff on Monday morning to brief them, about an hour-long meeting on what the pertinent work groups are doing within that realm. And so we will report back to you all with any sort of interesting feedback we receive. We were advised to keep that more of a water board centric or agency centric discussion. So the work groups that we are talking about are the wetlands, safe to swim, the harmful algal blooms network, safe to eat, as well as the healthy watersheds partnership, and just talking about how the efforts that those work groups are working with are helping to inform on the coastal issues. So that's coming up on Monday. And lastly, I've been working a lot with the National Water Quality Monitoring Council. For those that aren't aware, I am the council member representing US EPA Region 9 states. So California, Arizona, Hawaii, and some of the territories. And part of that role is to help planning of the main conference, which is the main product that National Council puts out, which is every biannual event where it used to be a really major 5-day event where people would get together and share what's being done nationwide around the water quality sphere, ecosystem health sphere. So I'm helping to plan that event for 2023. We're hoping it can be virtual, or not virtual, but maybe some sort of hybrid approach. I'm also working as a co-chair for a JEDI subgroup of that council, and been working with connecting and really uplifting what's being done at the California EPA and some of the work that we're doing within that sphere. And we've created an online resource through the HERO system at EPA. And we also recently had some presentations to the monitoring and assessment program, showcasing what the CCHAB network has done in the arena of crowdsourcing data from stakeholders by creating user-friendly apps to report potential haves, and then also how our incident response from the regions and how we display that information. A lot of the states were really impressed with what we were doing and looking to steal and borrow from what we've done, which is great. And we also recently just were able to update the Bloom Watch app, which is the main, you can take your phone out there and take a picture of it and submit a picture of what you think is a hab. It's been fully translated to Spanish, so it's been, you can, if you're a primarily Spanish speaker and you're out there recreating, then they can utilize that app more easily. With that, I'll take questions. I see Krista, you have a question. Your hand is.
Yeah, I actually have a question going back to one of the council member updates. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So going back to Grant Sharp's update about the wildfire and water quality, I'm also really interested in that. And so I was wondering if the link that you posted, Nick, in the chat, is it Casca? Is that?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that, was that the meeting that Grant was talking about?
That's the registration for that webinar.
Yeah. That's where you would go, Krista, to register for the quarterly meeting. And as soon as there is a draft agenda available, it will also be posted at that link. They're probably still pulling together the speakers on the various topics, and of course the feature being wildfire and water quality. But I'm sure as soon as the draft agenda is available, it will be posted at that link.
If you could, though, send it to Nick so he could send it out, that would be incredibly helpful. I noticed that there's a fee to attend.
There is a fee to attend the CASQA quarterly events. I know that I can't speak for the State Water Board, but I know that for the the annual conference, I think Casqua did arrange something with the State Water Board through the Training Academy. Nick might know a little bit more about that. I don't know if they have a similar arrangement for the quarterly meetings. Nick or Karen might have more information on that.
Yeah, the quarterly meetings, I know that I've only attended when I've been asked to speak, and then obviously they don't charge you to attend if you speak. But I think, you know, if we talk to Karen about potential avenues, but it's a member-based organization, so there's fees unless you're paying the membership dues. But
Just to be clear, that's Karen Cowan, not
sorry.
Karen Logan.
Yeah,
sorry. Karen.
Yes, Karen Cowan is executive director of Casqua.
Okay, I mean, so I was just really interested because, as I said in the chat, Coast has actually funded a couple different studies looking at water quality, mobilization of both sediments when you lose vegetation, but also mobilization specifically of PAHs following the Woolsey fire in Malibu, which I'm sure is close to Mark Gold's heart. So I was really interested in what that is, and like Coast could afford to pay, but the faculty members I work with would not pay to go to see that or something, but I could.
Right.
So, yeah, I'd be we'll be really interested in the agenda. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, Nick, I had a question if I could. I don't mean to jump in front of you, Ray. I know you have your hand up, but I just wanted real quick. I wanted to ask if there's a possibility that the Water Data Science Symposium will be held as an in-person event this year, or is it going to be virtual?
You just asked my question.
See, there's a reason I cut in front of you, Ray.
There you go.
Great minds think alike. Yeah, we're working under the assumption that it won't, just based on the building that we generally hold it in being still primarily shut down. That being the Cal EPA building, we're still working from home, and every time we start to even mention the idea of return to work, another surge of COVID or a variant pops up, and they kind of dial it back. So we're just assuming it'll be still virtual in nature. And if that changes, then we can try to pivot there, but we're working under the assumption at this point that it'll be virtual. Or maybe some sort of hybrid, but yeah.
Just on the topic of fire, EPA funded state of California to do some fire monitoring, and it was funneled to the SWAMP program. And I don't know when those results will be, but Grant, you might want to check to see if there are some things that could be useful for your presentation. I think Ali Dunn would be the point of contact for that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Terry. Just to be clear, it's not my presentation, but I will definitely pass that information along to Karen Cowan with Casqua, and that's very helpful. Thanks, Terry.
Can I just jump in on that? Ali Dunn is the right person to contact, although the funding was in our grant from last year. So my guess is that the monitoring is just getting ramped up, and it was in specific regions in the state that had been impacted by fire during a certain time frame. So it's not statewide. So just be aware of that, and it may be a little early.
Yeah, and Anna Holder posted a link for people interested in more information on that SWAMP specific project. Thanks, Anna. Any questions for me on the three topics I spoke about? Cool, let me off the hook. So on the item 4, I'll start it, and Karen and Mark can jump in where I messed it up. So first off, I wanted to officially introduce the newest council members. They've already spoken up quite a bit today, but the main primary focus, or one of the main focuses of the secretary briefing, was to get their approval of the 3 members that we recommended, those being Mark Starr for representing public health, Lorian Fono representing the regular POTWs, and Krista Kamer representing the academic community from CSU Coast. They unanimously supported all 3 of the nominations. So welcome to the council officially. We are excited to have you. yeah, look forward to a great working relationship moving forward. So that's been exciting. The second part, let me back up a second. It was a really short briefing. We had 30 minutes and it was January 14th this year. So it was really condensed and I got some lessons learned that I'll talk about, but we got together as a subcommittee and wrote up a one-pager outlining accomplishments of the work groups. And we decided to be kind of more that appreciative inquiry approach where we highlighted the good work of the work groups and not just, laid a bunch of complaints upon them. So we highlighted the accomplishments and then we had some key asks related to support from the secretaries, primarily focusing on support for monitoring in general at the state of California, putting a more emphasis on monitoring, recognizing that as questions continually be asked by the legislature and by our agencies regarding climate change and how do we address these issues without the monitoring to help feed those, it's going to be difficult for us to do that. So putting an emphasis on monitoring. We also asked obviously that they support the nominations and then also kind of focused a little bit on AB 1066. So the secretaries were really impressed with the accomplishments. Secretary Blumenfeld even referred to the work groups as an R&D arm of California, which I thought was an interesting perspective, that they really kind of are in a space where they can try things that maybe are outside of the constraints of a normal working environment, both in the state and maybe otherwise. Move forward, and then but they also we were highlighting some of the portals and had links to those. Secretary Crowfoot noticed that for example, the Safe to Eat or Safe to Swim visualization wasn't necessarily clear to him. He was looking at an area of River Park where he lives and trying to figure out what the data meant. So some good feedback there on making sure that as we present these visualizations and make turn data information, that we're doing it with the thought that of maybe an outside stakeholder that doesn't have the same mind meld that we have, so that they understand exactly what the data is saying and being presented. So like what does E. coli at 300 CFU really mean to an everyday user? So being more clear about that. And we've looked at that lens on other things like the CCHAB network and gone with more color coded aspects. So I've taken that feedback and we're working with the Safe to Swim network to kind of to refocus those portals on that ease of communication. They were also willing to help support with additional resources and support our asks for bringing in other BDOs that they have authority over and helping them to support things like AB 1066, which is the legislation about that tasks the council with helping define what the Water Board and CDPH with creating a work group to help define what as a priority inland recreational beach, and also to develop a potential monitoring program for what that would look like. Again, we were running out of time at that point, so we are working to schedule potentially an additional briefing on AB 1066. I wrote up a one-pager on the history of how that legislation developed, and have hopefully we'll get in front of the secretaries again sometime before the May revise, see how things pan out, and we're looking forward to our continued communication with the secretaries. Some of the lessons learned from my perspective is that given the short amount of time, I felt like a lot of time was wasted by myself just going over those accomplishments, not necessarily wasted, but I took up a lot of time just talking, and I would rather have had a more free conversation with the secretary. So in the future, I think we'll have a different way of engaging with the secretaries to allow kind of a more open discussion, still highlight the accomplishments, but maybe just focus on more of the discussion about feedback and ways that they can help us as well as we can help them. So
I'm sure Karen wants to add to that. Everyone knows me. I'm always the cup not even being half empty, but being bone dry. But I'll go to half empty on this. Nick, I strongly disagree with that characterization. That was going to happen either way. It didn't matter what you were going to talk about. That's just the nature of getting those two together. Just realize they're doing 10 of those meetings a day and every day, and they're working 6 days a week, and so they're pretty crazed. So we were stuck with an impossible task, which I think we did it. Especially you and Karen did a really good job on. It was good to have Steve there to support as well on, saying what the heck are we actually doing, which they didn't know. So that was really, really important. And they were very excited about the wastewater surveillance part because it had just been in the news and it was such a big deal. And, so they a lot of times it's like whatever's been in the news recently is sort of what they're focused on. But you and Karen were able to relay all the enormous amount of work that we're doing. That had to be done. I mean, they had to have a better idea of what this council actually is. The thing that we needed was just more time, which is to carve out a specific ask. That's what they respond to is the specific ask, and making it seem like if we don't fund it, California's going to fall into the sea or something. I mean, it's got to be considered the most important thing in the world, or else it's just not going to be there. The other thing is that ask on 1066, as you saw, characterizing it as an EJ play is 100% the right thing to do with both of those people. And, so in that mini proposal, make it clear that's who's using the inland beaches is the most diverse parts of California. And then without having this, then we're not going to be able to have the program necessary to protect public health from those communities that are most at risk. So it's really all in the specifics, and a lot of it is tagging it to their biggest priorities or what's in the headlines recently, and that's just the nature of the administration, just to be candid. So it was good. I'm really glad we did it.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the perspective. You do a lot more of these than I do. So.
Yeah, I'll echo what Mark said. I thought that there was a lot positive. We're on their radar, which is not something that we could say about previous secretaries of the agencies. So I think that's a huge positive. And just having the opportunity to brief them and talk about what we're doing, huge positive. I think the lack of outcome, I'll agree with Mark. We just didn't have the time and really don't have a ready proposal that they can take and run with. And so I think we need as a council to think about what are some key things that we could, specifics as to what we could ask for their help on. The other thing that I wanted to mention from the notes that I took is, Wade certainly took a look at some of the council work group websites and really felt like we could do a better job of making it user-friendly and understandable. And Jared sort of chimed in on that same point and said, we really need to do a better job of telling stories. And, we're all scientists, engineers, we are about the data and getting dots on maps and getting them out there to the public. We need to engage with the people who are better at, and I think AWEMA has done a huge effort through the water data challenges to do that very thing. And so we just need to take advantage of the folks that we have that can help us tell the story that the public can consume and understand. So that would be my perspective.
Hey, one last thing, Karen and Nick, related to this is that, and you may recall I said this before, I still think that opportunity, I don't know what the right call is, but obviously we've talked a fair amount about it this morning. I still think the opportunity, because there's so much money that is going towards wildfire, like if there was a specific wildfire monitoring ask don't assume that's dead on arrival, because there is a lot of money going in that realm. You know, I mean, money that we wish we'd ever see on the water quality side. I mean, it's orders of magnitude more than we're used to seeing on this side. So, you know, for them, it could be like a rounding error to do something significant on the monitoring side. I'm not 100% sure how to execute that, but, you know, a strong proposal that's modest might make sense. You know, especially now there's enough articles that are out there to cite, to basically say, oh, geez, this is an impact we're seeing on, you know, impacts to macroinvertebrates. Here's impacts that we're seeing on plume and turbidity. Here's impacts that we're seeing on fecal indicator bacteria densities. That paper just came out from UCLA and JPL. So there's a, you know, the Woolsey fire stuff. So there's just enough out there that maybe something like that could be put together with a modest ask. I don't know, just a thought. I know people got a million other things to do, but I think that's another thing that sort of fits the criteria that we've been talking about. Back to you, Nick.
Mark. Thank you. Thanks, Mark and Karen. Are there any, oh, I see Evelyn. Go ahead, Evelyn.
I just wanted to, Karen, you basically addressed what I was going to bring up, as you probably know. But I wanted to complement that and highlight, just put an exclamation point on that, because healthy websites for all these work groups also help share information among agencies that I think sometimes is like missing a little bit, like the silo working kind of, you know, so I just wanted to put an exclamation point on your comment. So thank you for saying that.
Thanks, everyone. Is there any other questions or feedback that they want to have on item 4? I will say it was kind of interesting after going through all the accomplishments. I think that they assumed we were funded. Then we had to say that we weren't funded, and I was like, maybe I overtalked how good we were, so it should be maybe more of a woe is me story. But they were very impressed. But then we told them, oh yeah, and this is all primarily volunteer based, except for my position. They were kind of like, oh. So I think that's an important other thing to emphasize, is that this is great work, but it's all super shoestring. But we're doing a great job and getting the word out, like Karen mentioned and Mark mentioned, that, you know, we're in the legislation for the first time since like a main role of legislation since this was founded back in 2006. We got the attention of the U.S. Congress, so we're doing much better in our communication of who we are and what we're doing. But yeah, to Anna's point, you know, we need to kind of emphasize, you know, this is what we're doing, but imagine what we could do if we had some funding to help support some of this work, and how much, you know, we could dedicate resources to the communication pieces and helping answer some of these more high priority topics like wildfire, climate change impacts. So bottom line, keep up the good work. Let's see, Josh, item 5. Josh Steele, are you online?
I am. I'm
great.
here.
I wasn't sure. Yeah. Well, welcome. Let me introduce Josh Steele. He's been helping to lead the wastewater-based surveillance subcommittee. He's from the Southern California Coastal Water Resource Project. And I'll just go ahead and hand it over to you, Josh. Do you want to take control? I'll stop sharing.
Sure. Let's see. Can you see the slides?
Yep, that's it right there.
All right. So, all right, thanks everybody. I'm Josh Steele. I'm just going to give you an update on the Wastewater-Based Epidemiology Committee. Whoops, something is not right here. Hold on. There we go. The biggest update to give you, I guess, or the background to give you, is that wastewater-based epidemiology has become an integral part of the COVID-19 pandemic response. And Mark Starr, who's also a member of the committee earlier, sort of alluded to this and gave you a brief preview, but we've passed a major milestone that the CDC has incorporated the wastewater SARS coronavirus 2 data and is featuring the data in its public COVID-19 dashboards. And the California Department of Public Health also has a public dashboard that's featuring the data of the SARS coronavirus concentrations in the wastewater. California's wastewater community and public health community have been instrumental in making this happen, leading the way and pushing it forward. And the committee, the subcommittee, has provided important guidance during basically from the beginning to the creation of this community and the infrastructure and all of it to be able to do this. And one of the things that makes this committee so special is it sort of reflects the Water Quality Monitoring Council and having multiple different agencies all participating together and working together towards a common goal. So we have the Water Board, of course, and the state public health officials and local public health officials and the wastewater community and researchers are all represented on the committee. So where we're the very next step, I mean, is that we've passed this milestone. We are tracking total SARS coronavirus in wastewater, and we've gotten pretty good at that. But that's not enough anymore. What's next is to actually track variants. And so far, the wastewater-based epidemiology community has been wildly successful at this. As you all probably are well aware of, the Omicron variant was detected in wastewater weeks before clinical samples in California and was actually included in ahead of time. So how is this committee helping this next step? Well, in a couple of ways. One way is there's building more infrastructure at the state level. The California Department of Public Health is setting up a wastewater monitoring laboratory to both sort of improve the long-term sustainability of this wastewater monitoring and to provide a lab that once it gets set up and running can quantify variants as they emerge, as well as the total SARS coronavirus concentration. Because they're setting up this lab and it's sort of building on 2 years of work that the wastewater community and other labs have been doing, there's a necessity to sort of provide quality assurance and to be able to make sure the data is comparable to that 2 years of historical data. So the Wastewater-Based Epidemiology Committee is helping to coordinate a laboratory intercalibration study, and we're working on agreeing on it and determining a comparison metric so that we can be confident in that quality assurance and the comparability to historical data. That's only one way. Another way that we're helping is the members of this committee are actively involved in tracking variants in sewage. So especially the research community and some of the wastewater community have been developing methods to detect and quantify known variants in sewage. And that's how they identified Omicron. They heard about it and they were able to get an assay together to detect it and quickly look for it in wastewater and find it. Also developing new methods to screen sewage for both variant sequences that we know and ones we don't know yet. So sort of a broader screening tool. And then incorporate these data into public health decision-making and communicating it to the public. As I mentioned, Omicron data was detected first in wastewater, but it was also included in public health decisions in December for, I think, the first time. So what the committee is doing, we had issued guidance before to public health agencies and to wastewater treatment agencies about variant tracking and the state of the science and the state of the research and gave some caveats about it. But the committee has decided it's time now, with all of the success that we've had, to update that guidance. Advances in both covering advances in methods and how to determine the confidence in your detection and how you integrate it with other data sources like clinical samples, as well as coordinating across the public health agencies and the laboratories and the wastewater treatment agencies, and then how to go about communicating the results. And so that's one of the next things that the committee is going to focus on. But beyond that, as Mark mentioned earlier, we're also expanding looking past the COVID-19 pandemic. And the idea here is to build on all this rebirth, this renaissance of wastewater-based epidemiology and avoid this loss of community of practice, this loss of this knowledge and loss of this coordination that's sprung up around this pandemic response. And we're working through the committee to identify new targets for future wastewater surveillance, and also developing criteria, not just to identify them, but to prioritize which targets to recommend and to look for public health impact. And a few examples Mark gave were antimicrobials or antimicrobial resistance, as well as there's other respiratory viruses that are difficult to monitor, like influenza or respiratory syncytial virus, as well as chemical targets, such as opioids or antimicrobial chemicals themselves rather than the resistance genes, as well as other pathogens. And so that's sort of where we're headed next. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Lorian, go ahead, please.
You mentioned, well, thanks for a great presentation, Josh. You mentioned that public health decisions had been made for the first time in December based on the wastewater based surveillance data. Could you give us some more information about what those decisions were?
So my understanding is that in California, the one I'm most familiar with is in California, that when they identified the Omicron variant in some of the wastewater streams, they actually had that prior to any clinical detection, and they were starting to act, or I guess form their response based on that. And then the confirmation with the very first clinical sample they got, and that was enough to make them announce and start implementing measures to mitigate that wave and get sort of on top of it early with those two pieces of data in hand. That's my understanding from what I've understood. Mark may also have some other slight details to change or to add to that.
No, I think you've done a great job, Josh. And I first want to compliment you and Steve Weisberg and for Squirt for really keeping this subcommittee moving forward, not just active, but also really moving forward in real positive directions. And it's a great group, as you described, and really important. Yeah, for public health, we knew Omicron was around. I mean, we'd heard reports from South Africa and Europe. And so the question was not if, but when it would arrive in the US and in California in our case, and ramping up our increased prevention measures, that whether it ranges from masking, increased efforts for vaccination, restrictions on indoor gatherings, size of, mega gatherings, all these things are part of our guidance as we adjust as the waves occur. So the wastewater detection earlier, in some areas in particular, was a couple weeks earlier than clinical detection, allowed us to know that it was in that community. And not everybody gets tested clinically, has access to testing. It's not as timely as when they use the toilet and discharge viral particles and RNA that can be detected in the wastewater. So it really is quite an advantage for us to get people preventing further spread of what was at that time, and probably mostly still is, the most highly contagious version of this virus so far. So really important.
Thanks, Mark. Terry?
Yeah, so forgive me, I got distracted during this call, but so Josh, the question that I have is, this is great for California, but how about the rest of the nation? What's the interplay between what's happening in California, what's happening in Michigan, what's happening in other parts of the country?
So, I mean, that's a great question. Thanks, Terry. There's quite a bit of interplay, both through the National Wastewater Surveillance System, the program that California is participating in, and the dashboard I mentioned, the CDC, has started incorporating wastewater-based surveillance, and California was one of the leaders in that. So we've helped lead the way, and there's other groups that are the wastewater-based epidemiology community nationwide that this subcommittee also is very actively involved in. I think just about everybody on the committee is actively involved in, shares both a lot of the methods and practices, as well as ways to analyze and understand and interpret the data. But the biggest thing is just that the CDC is finally taking it to heart and incorporating it into their decision making as well. So not only at a local level are we incorporating it in, but at a national level, it's a way to track. And again, as Mark was saying, when testing rates go down, or when we know it's around but we don't know where, it gives us a way to have some early detection and sensitive detection of outbreaks or with variants. Did that answer your question, Terry?
Yes.
I could add a little quick thing to that too. I mean, part of what we're doing is funded by CDC, so it's somewhat being driven at the national level. There's a national data structure called, the whole approach to this is called NEWS, NWSS, the National Wastewater Surveillance System. And we all interact on a regular basis with our colleagues at the national level. And then, as Josh mentioned, even our subcommittee, the representation from Stanford here in California, they're actually a collaboration with other academic researchers at Emory University as well as University of Michigan and their project. So there's a lot of interaction across the country.
Yeah, it's certainly a nationwide and even international, somewhat coordinated response as well. And I just wanted to point out, in case folks missed it, Raphael has put a number of the links to both the California dashboard for wastewater surveillance and the CDC dashboard, if you want to check that out. Thanks, Raphael.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph. Josh, I had a quick question just to follow up on some of the things you highlighted. I just wanted to get if you could kind of put some insight on the timeline on the intercalibration study and some of the, I watched a little bit of the meeting yesterday about the potential, the conversion between the different methods, the 4 different methods that are out there, sludge versus some of the other dilution methods. If you could talk just briefly about that and maybe the timeline on when a potential kind of final set of findings would be able to be talked about.
Yeah, sure, I'm happy to. So the lab is up and running and accepting samples now, and they right now I think have about 5 or 6 plants that they're treatment plants that they're getting samples from. And we're doing intercalibration on all 5 of those. 3 of those plants have been doing it since the first of the year, basically the beginning of January, and so the results from those, where we'll be comfortable looking at that, is probably coming by the end of the month. So by the next meeting of the committee, we should be able to have a pretty good sense of whether or not we have a nice way to integrate the data with the data that lab is producing with historical data. And then as they bring on more plants, I think the more data we get, so those are sort of the first 3, and that'll determine how we assess the remaining plants that are as they're coming on. And I think it'll become sort of a rolling thing as plants come on. We'll be able to ensure that we can basically keep that going forward, as well as be able to compare it to the 2 years of data we already have.
Thanks, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Lauren.
So what's the ultimate goal for coverage in terms of participation in this program? Are you trying to get, yes, a small set of representative facilities across the state, or as much participation as possible, or something in between?
My understanding, and this is a little bit more up to the Department of Public Health than it is to our committee, of course, is that they want to get fairly broad participation. So they're ramping it up, but they are going from, starting with 5 or 6 to up to 15. And then I've heard they would like to get up, to 30 or 40 plants in the near future. Those are the numbers that I have heard them discuss. So it's all a matter of ramping it up and making sure they can handle that number of samples coming in and be able to monitor.
So I can give you a little bit of an update on that. Right now we have collected 6,000 data points. Since December 2020, there are 21 wastewater treatment plants participating in this program, and is approximately 48% of the California population. So we have the largest systems, and now we're working on adding a one by one smaller systems. But the idea is to capture as many as possible.
Got it. There's a lot of enthusiasm for this program, both amongst the folks, the agencies that are already participating, as well as the ones who are not. So I definitely think that there's a lot of expansion potential if the program can accommodate it.
Well, thanks, Josh. Did you want to make? I don't know if you want to make an official announcement that you're taking over leadership of this.
Oh, right. I guess I should. should make that. Yeah, I'm was named to take over being chair of the committee. Steve Weisberg is stepping down as chair, although he will remain a member of the committee.
Cool. Well, thanks for the time today and the update, and we look forward to future updates as more data comes in. But thanks for all the great work you've been leading, and it's a great work group to listen in on too when I can. So it's really fascinating.
Thanks.
Well done, Josh.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and move on. Is that a residual hand, Lori? I assume so. Yeah, okay. Move on to item 6, which is a presentation on the Southern Orange County flow study, which is really a great use case for the California Environmental Flows Framework, which was, if you're not familiar, developed by the Environmental Flows Work Group under the council. I'll go ahead and turn it over to, so you hear my message machine, to Grant, who can introduce Eric and Aaron. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick, and thank you for the opportunity to share this study with the council this morning. We thought that there would be some interest from the council on this effort, from the perspective that, as Nick said, this is one of the first case studies of the framework developed by the California Environmental Flows Work Group of this council. But we also think that, there was some excellent examples of, innovative ways to share data and develop, I think also, as you'll see, some development of some pretty good data visualization tools came through this effort as well. So I'm actually going to have our lead on this effort from Orange County Public Works introduce the study team who will be presenting this to you this morning. So Amanda Abrahamian, if you are on, I think you're there. Go ahead and take it away, please.
Hello, thank you for having us. Thank you, Grant, for all the background. My name is Amanda Abrahamian. I'm with the South OC Stormwater Program. Our study team includes both SQUIRP and Geosyntec. And then today we're going to be having Eric Stein and Chris Taniguchi-Kwan from SQUIRP presenting, as well as Aaron Pereski from Geosyntec. So we'll go over this case study of the CEF and then also the results of our analysis. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And it's a pleasure to see everybody today. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the work group that Grant mentioned and the California Environmental Flows Framework, just as a bit of context, and then I'll turn it over to Chris to talk specifically about the study. So if you could advance to the next slide, Chris. Great. So probably about, I'm guessing about 5.5 years ago, I came to the council, I came to this group, and we started a discussion about the issues of flow modification. And so I think we all recognize that flow modification is one of the major stressors that affects our stream health and the beneficial uses. We also recognize that with emerging policies for water reuse and climate change, that these issues were becoming more complicated and difficult to address. So the other thing that we talked about when we chatted about this was that there were numerous programs in the state and numerous agencies, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the State Water Board, the Department of Water Resources, all independently were addressing issues of flow management and how to determine how to best manage flows in the systems that they worked in. But there was virtually no coordination between these efforts. And so we had a lot of parallel efforts with lots of different methodologies, pretty much a lack of data sharing and cross discussion among the group. So it seemed like a perfect role for the council. And so based on those discussions, the California Environmental Flows Work Group was established, and it was really there to help solve some of these really daunting problems about how to address environmental flows across programs and leverage our various resources. So we can go to the next slide. So the work group, the mission of the work group is really to advance the science of supporting of environmental flows assessment and how it's applied for various applications. And what I will say after nearly 6 years of working with this group, it's been a real pleasure. The group is co-chaired by the Division of Water Rights at the State Water Board and the Department of Fish and Wildlife's In-Stream Flow Program. And in my opinion, I think one of the biggest accomplishments of this group is really just the dialogue. It's been really impressive to me to watch over the last 5 years or so how we've gone from programs that are really operating independently to lots of really close coordination at the technical and the application level. So there's really great interaction, a lot of consistency in terms of how to approach these problems and what tools to apply and how to best share information and knowledge across the programs. I commented to Nick at the most recent quarterly meeting of the work group that there was just a lot of great dialogue among local watershed groups and people on sort of the boots on the ground side with the agencies in terms of how to begin in implementing the environmental flows framework within their respective areas. And so there's a lot of sort of bottom up interest now in using these tools. So I think it's a real testament to what the council tries to do in terms of having these work groups function as a forum for this dialogue and this coordination. So I just think that's a great example. So one of the major products, as Grant alluded to, is the California Environmental Flows Framework. The first draft version of this came out about almost a year ago now. And this was really a product of this technical team that you can see on the slide to lay out a statewide framework that can be used consistently across various agencies and programs to answer questions about how to establish environmental flow targets or criteria or whatever you want to call them to protect beneficial uses in the stream. So next slide. So I won't go into detail on this because we presented to you in the past, but just a high level recap is that the California Environmental Flows Framework is based on this functional flows approach, which really targets the entire annual hydrograph and aims to manage or restore flow components across the annual hydrograph that are going to maintain stream functions. So it's not based on necessarily replicating historical flows, which we know may be impossible in many cases, but really restoring the functions of those systems across the annual hydrograph. It's a 3-tiered system. One of the big charges that we agreed on early is that we don't have enough time or money to do watershed specific analyses for every watershed in the state of California. So there was a real desire to start with a framework that allowed statewide application at a very high level or a course level with the opportunity to sort of tier down to more levels of specificity as the need and the resources allowed. And so this is this sort of 3-tiered framework where Section A can be applied. We have tools now that can develop preliminary flow criteria for every stream reach in the state of California. And those are already available online through the website. And then we have a mechanism to customize those through Section B for issues and constraints within your watershed. And then finally in Section C, where we sort of look at the balancing act between ecological needs and non-ecological needs. And so with the framework out, if you go to the next slide, the next phase is really to start demonstrating this, right? Because everybody knows these frameworks are great and these approaches are great, but until you actually start to do it and implement it, it's not real. And so we identified a number of case studies around the state where we could demonstrate how CEF could be applied in a variety of different settings, refine the process through the practical experience of working through this, and hopefully create some templates and some examples that can be used where other watersheds or other regions can look at these examples and use them as starting points to figure out how to apply SEF within their geographies. And we're already seeing that beginning to occur. And then finally, to improve our consistency in terms of how these are applied and to share knowledge and information across the programs. So that's really just kind of the background on the environmental flows framework and how we got to these case studies. I think our goal for today now is to really present the South Orange County case study, which is one of the first in the state to actually kind of go through the entire process and produce outputs and products. And so I'm going to turn over to Chris from our team, and she's going to walk you through the specific case study.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So there's been multiple case studies that are being implemented across the state. This is a list of just a couple of them, and they all aim to answer a variety of different management questions. The first two listed here are one of the first case studies that have been completed. And as Eric mentioned today, we're going to be focusing on the South Orange County Flow Ecology Study. And so this study was focused in the South Orange County watershed management area in Southern California, which includes multiple coastal draining watersheds, as you can see on the map on the right, including Aliso Creek, which is in purple, and the San Juan Creek watershed, which is shaded in red, among many others. Most of these watersheds are highly urbanized, with portions of the upper tributaries being undeveloped. And in this region, altered hydrology and channel erosion have been identified as the highest priority water quality conditions across the region. And so the main objective of this study is to really develop tools and approaches to inform decisions regarding flow management actions, to address altered hydrology, and to ultimately improve the biological condition in the streams. This includes identifying when and where flows are altered and the level of flow alteration that is associated with a decline in biological condition. And so we aim to use all of this information to prioritize areas for flow management and also to identify flow management recommendations or flow targets that the local watershed managers and co-permittees can use in implementing projects on the ground. A big component of the study was stakeholder engagement. So we've led a series of stakeholder and technical advisory meetings that really help to shape and inform the entire project. And then lastly, we want to provide readily available access to data, tools, and products that can inform on the ground actions. And so as Eric mentioned through SEF, we've developed a suite of tools, including a statewide model that predicts reference hydrology. However, for this study, Geosyntec developed a detailed watershed model because it provided finer temporal and spatial resolution compared to the statewide model. It also allowed us to evaluate multiple future scenarios of climate change and increased water conservation. And lastly, it allowed us to leverage and use local monitoring data and information on hydrologic features to more accurately characterize hydrology across this region. For example, we incorporated an isotope study that quantifies natural versus unnatural water contribution. So how much of the in-stream flows during the summertime are from local sources like groundwater versus imported water. And Aaron Pereski from Geosyntec, he led this detailed hydrologic analysis and he's on the line. So I wanted to open up the floor to see if he had any elaborations to this.
No, Chris, you did a great job. I'm here to answer any questions that come up on this, but I won't hold us up. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. So overall, we implemented a 3-tiered process using the detailed hydrologic analysis and modeling to assess first the degree of hydrologic alteration. So when and where flows altered compared to reference conditions. Number 2 is what places do we think alteration is impacting bioassessment indices, the California Stream Condition Index and the Algal Stream Condition Index, which are both indicative of overall stream health. And then lastly, the types of flows that are needed to support higher trophic level species of management concern. So in a nutshell, we combined our hydrologic analysis and the detailed watershed model with ecological response models to answer a lot of our questions. And so we use this process to develop flow-based targets across different components of the annual hydrograph for different species of management concerns. So this is just one example table that shows the natural range of flow metrics, and then also site-specific flow needs for willow, which is indicative of riparian habitat for sensitive bird species like the least-bell's vireo, and then also for native aquatic species like the arroyo chub. So this is just one example from an example location. At this specific location, I want to note that channel enlargement is a big issue. And so if you might notice, some of the base flow magnitude flow needs are really high, and that's because the channel is enlarged. So we would need really high base flows during the wet and the dry season in order to provide suitable depths for arroyo chub in this specific location. And so channel modifications in addition to flow management actions may be necessary in some of these highly altered reaches. And so we've produced flow recommendations for multiple locations across the entire study area. And so in addition to the flow recommendations, we've also produced a suite of data products aimed at answering these key questions. So when and where are flows altered, where is alteration impacting biology, and where are priority areas for flow management. And so these data products can be used to inform management decisions, including, where should flow management be prioritized on the ground, where should channel restoration be prioritized, and then how should flows and channel morphology be restored in some of these high priority reaches. And as I mentioned earlier, in some of these highly enlarged reaches, under the existing channel conditions, we would never be able to support some of these native aquatic species like arroyo chub. In this example, the flow is spread out across a really widened channel. So in return, we get really shallow depths. And so for a part of this study, we explored how changes to the channel morphology can be made to provide more suitable habitat conditions and ultimately to try to make the most out of the water that we do have in the system. And so we evaluated an example channel design that was narrower and had an inset floodplain. And so as you can see in this picture, with the same amount of water, we would be able to achieve deeper, more suitable depths in the active channel that could support native aquatic species. So this is just one illustrative example that we explored with the data that we've produced, but there are many other ways to explore the different data types that we've made through this study. And so we also developed user-friendly data visualization tools that could facilitate ongoing coordination among the watershed stakeholders as they plan specific projects aimed at improving in-stream flow conditions. So this is just a screenshot, but I have the link on this slide here. Feel free to check out our Shiny app and look at what we've produced through this project. And so with that, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Amanda to go over how the data products can be used locally.
Thank you, Chris. So we have a handful of work products from this study. This slide kind of goes over a conceptual map of how we might use some of them. We can take the outfall water quality and the water resource priorities that we already have and incorporate where we see flow reduction or augmentation most needed in order to determine some candidate flow management projects. And we can go further and determine how much flow might not impact biology in order to select projects. And then if applicable, we could look at some target channel hydraulics if the focal species of this study are applicable to the chosen project, and if stream channel rehabilitation will be incorporated. So that kind of walks through how the data products can be used while also still incorporating priorities that we get from other studies and other monitoring that we've done. So back to you, Chris.
Great, thanks, Amanda. And I just want to note that this study is just, one piece of the entire project planning puzzle. So yeah, thanks, Amanda, for that. I do want to highlight that there is a special issue journal in Frontiers in Environmental Science, Freshwater Science. It's called Environmental Flows in an Uncertain Future. This is an open access journal. And so all of the articles that are published are readily available online. So you can use the link here. This special issue really provides additional external peer review of the CEF products and also for the case studies. There's 20 total articles so far that have been submitted to this special issue, and then 6 of them are related to CEF. 2 articles are from this South Orange County case study. And this just really gives a great opportunity to highlight CEF in the context of international efforts. And so feel free to check out the link here. You want to look at some of our articles. So in terms of what do we learn from the study, we found that there is pervasive alteration observed in urban areas across the study region. However, hydrologic alteration affects biological condition to varying degrees, depending on the location, the season, and the biological endpoint. So we've developed a process and tools to prioritize subbasins for flow management by linking hydrologic alteration to biological response. And so this approach can be implemented in other regions across the state where bioassessment data has also been collected. CEF also provides flexible guidance that can be applied to highly altered systems. So we highlighted the importance of developing a more detailed local watershed model and using monitoring data where when looking at CEF in some of these highly altered systems, for example, using the statewide tools could miss some important site-specific hydrologic features in this watershed that the broad-scale tools may not have captured. We also found that consideration of mediating factors like channel alteration is really important when developing flow recommendations. These mediating factors can alter the relationship between flow and ecology. And especially in some of these highly altered systems, we know that reverting back to entirely natural flow conditions may not be achievable or practical in many cases. And so it's really important to consider all of these different factors. And then lastly, non-flow management actions like channel restoration, in addition to flow management, may be necessary to achieve the ecological flow needs. So we illustrated how additional actions can be made to help to make the most out of the water that we do have. And so this is a really critical consideration, especially given future changes in climate, increases in drought, and increases in water conservation. And so for more information on our study, feel free to check out the study website on the left. We also have an open data portal hosted by Orange County's Box app. And so we have the link here that includes all of our final data products and also our final report. Oops. Oh, sorry. Start this over again. Okay. Can you still see?
Yeah, it looks good.
Oops, sorry. Go back. Okay, sorry about that. So how does this study feed back into the environmental flows work group? For one, we provide inclusive data access. All of the tools, data, and reports are open to the public and readily available online. We've shared these resources with the work group. We've also given case study presentations to the group, which are critical in providing tangible examples of an approach that was highly conceptual, as Eric mentioned. And these presentations have garnered great dialogue among the work group members on ways that CEF can be implemented in other locations and to answer other management questions For example, how does all of this connect to Sigma and groundwater management? And then lastly, this provides an example of local implementation of a statewide approach. So CEF is seen as a living document. So as more case studies are implemented across the state, we hope to use the lessons learned and information to help to refine the statewide approach. And so the work group has reached a huge milestone in developing the California Environmental Flows Framework. Moving forward, the work group continues to be a forum for discussing how flow management issues and efforts different efforts across California. We have broad participation across all these different agencies and different local groups. And as Eric mentioned, the level of engagement and dialogue in our meetings have been really impressive. And of course, this fosters collaboration, cross-pollination of different ideas and information sharing, and many of which would not have been possible at this scale without the work group. And then lastly, we have active interest in participation in case studies and the desire to expand to other watersheds, which really speaks to the broad consensus and acceptance of the statewide framework and the initial success of the work group. And I just wanted to end saying that the Environmental Flows Work Group has helped to address multiple challenges of setting environmental flows across the state, and will continue to be a vital forum as we face ongoing and new challenges into the future. And so with that, I'm going to open the floor for any questions, and feel free to reach out to us. These are our emails here.
This is Ray. Great presentation. Certainly aware of the South County work, and this is something I'm glad to see that could be expanded statewide. There were a number of links that you mentioned. Could you put those in the chat, or maybe link us to the actual presentation? Because I definitely want to follow up on this.
Yeah, definitely. I'll copy the different links and post them in the chat, and we can share our presentation as well.
Great. Any other questions? Not seeing. Well, thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it. Great presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much for your time.
That we're pretty much right on time. We bring in item 7, which is a presentation from our CCHAB co-chairs, Sarah Ryan and Becky Stanton. Sarah, Becky, are you ready?
Yes.
Great. You cue me and I will advance.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sarah Ryan with the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians, and I'll be joined with Becky Stanton from OEHA. We are both co-chairs for CCHAB. We are going to be talking about a topic that we've already presented to some extent at CCHAB, but we wanted to bring it to the larger group because of some of the things that we've been able to determine over this last year through a CalWatch monitoring project. Next slide, please. So the CalWatch program is a CDC-funded project that is being managed by Tracking California Public Health Institute. It's primarily happening along in Clear Lake, in Lake County, California, although there are some other components to it that are statewide in terms of OHAB, HAB, and illness reporting. And it is a 5-year project. We are now in year 2, so I'm really reporting on year 1. Next slide, please. So the goal of this project is to see the water quality from the tap water of private systems on Clear Lake. Prior to this project, it was not really tracked how many homes on Clear Lake were supplying their own water from near shore wells or their own intakes. So we were able to, with this project, not only determine which of those homes on the lake were supplying their own drinking water for their home, but we also used it to do outreach to them and to sign them up for our tap water testing, as well as provide results. Next slide, please. And you can see on this map of Clear Lake, which does have 100 miles of shoreline, it's the largest natural freshwater lake in California. The orange highlighted areas along the shoreline are actually the eligible households who are not hooked up to public water systems, and also are lots that have structures on them. And we determined there were approximately 450 of these lots on Clear Lake who were getting their drinking water from the lake or a near shore well. And through our outreach and communication with all of these eligible folks through door hangers, mailings to the mailing address, to the physical address, and also social media and press releases, we were able to sign up 54 of those homes. We also got a lot of information about their usage of the water and the drinking water at their homes, as well as any illnesses that they have noticed, and their own practices and habits with the drinking water in the house, and also their usage of it. Most of these homes are either located or the owner lives in them, but there's a substantial number of people who use it for vacation rentals through vacation companies, or it's their second home. Next slide, please. So we did have earlier in the season last year, we tested the water of our participants for nitrates, E. coli, and total coliform, and also herbicides that are used on Clear Lake for various aquatic weed management. We had also planned to do cyanotoxin sampling at the end of the season, when we usually see the higher toxin levels in Clear Lake. And just as an aside, the tribe I work for, our program, we do the cyanotoxin monitoring on Clear Lake. So we had a lot of information about the ambient water quality just from our own program. But because the toxin levels in the lake were just rising higher than we had seen in previous years, and we actually got a result value as high as 160,000 micrograms per liter for microcystin. But as even earlier than that, we were getting much higher levels. So we decided to start earlier in terms of our monitoring and do it at the earlier phase of monitoring of cyanotoxins of the tap water. So as you can see on the slide, we measured 36 homes between June and October, and then 41 in November, mainly after the blooms were over. And the samples were sent to 2 different labs for toxin testing. In terms of the earlier summer sampling, we did mostly look for microcystin, but because we were seeing Lingbia and some other species that produce more than just microcystin, we also tested for Spermopsin and saxitoxin and anatoxin, at least through qPCR for gene copies, or also for the toxin result itself. Next slide, please. So the photos that you see there are from the tap water of some of our participants. This is after the various levels of treatment that they had on their private systems. We did identify microcystis, gliotrichia, camptonema, and of the 36 homes that we tested in the summer, 20 of them had detectable microcystin in them. The highest value was 3.85 micrograms per liter. Just as a reminder, EPA has a health advisory of 0.3 micrograms per liter for microcystin if children are drinking that water. So we were quite surprised to be seeing intact cyanobacteria after chlorination, pumps, various types of treatments, even RO. Next slide, please. And this is a table actually of the different types of treatment that the homes had. As I mentioned, we asked quite a few questions and were able to collect a lot of information about our participants. And you can see from the treatment that there are a few different kinds of ways that people treat their water for drinking water for their homes. You can see actually all the other types of contaminants that we are looking for in their drinking water. And because of what we were seeing in terms of coliform, E. coli, and others, earlier in the season, we were quite concerned about the vulnerability of these private drinking water systems, especially as the toxins were getting higher in the ambient water, and knowing that these intakes were, pulling that same water into their homes. You can see from the last column on the right that the detective cyanotoxins of these different types of treatment were as high as 67% of those homes sampled, all the way up to 100% for several different kinds of treatment that our participants had. So this is for the summer testing. Next slide. So as a result of these just the vulnerability of these systems, and then increasing ambient cyanotoxin levels, we were in constant communication with the public health officer, the health services department in the county of Lake, and other state and federal agencies about this issue. And so because of the result of that, we had the public health officer did a public health advisory, which was in place from September 16th to November 16th. And it directed folks to not drink their water, or recommended not to drink their water in two different arms of Clear Lake. Clear Lake has 3 arms, so these 2 arms which had the highest toxin levels. And we also were able to get alternate sources of water set up with basically people could drive up to it and fill their jugs, and we were willing to assist with bottled water as well during this, and we stayed in touch with with the public about this issue during the health advisory. Next slide, please. In November, we did our planned sampling with the results, or the water samples going to the CDPH lab. Even though, despite the fact that the toxin levels were lower in the lake, we still saw that many of the homes still had intact cyanobacteria in their tap water after their treatment, and the highest result value was still higher than the US EPA health advisory. These samples were we were surprised that there was still cyanobacteria and cyanotoxins in their tap water, but we did ask all of the participants about the actions that they took prior to or after the public health advisory. And so we have some data on that as well, whether they flushed their systems, and we provided them some recommendations, but whether they flushed their systems or changed out their type of treatment systems. Many of them chose not to do anything. What they did was added more chlorine, but that was kind of the most common action, even though that was definitely not recommended. Next slide, please. So here is the information about the treatment types of our participants. I would like to say that all of the participants who had cyanotoxins in their finished water were all intakes and not the nearshore wells. So you can see that even with in the lower toxin levels in the lake in November, that we still reached as high as 50% of one type of treatment had toxins detected in their finished water. Next slide, please. We did, of course, when the results came back, we not only sent them pictures of their microscopy so they could see what their tap water looked like under the microscope, but also, of course, got back with them about the results and are in the process of also sending out additional information that puts it in really good user-friendly reading. And we are also having a community results return planned for this next month for all of our participants. Next slide, please. And this is Becky's.
Great. Thank you. So I want to take what Sarah started with in terms of individual household water treatment and HABs and focus it down even on a smaller scale in terms of portable handheld water treatment system. And to provide some context for why these would be used, hikers and backpacks are often using it to ingest water from a natural water source while participating in that recreation, primarily to address bacteria, protozoa, viruses such as Giardia, as you may have heard of. And natural water sources may really be the only feasible option for doing these activities, particularly in California. As folks may realize, water is quite heavy to carry. And for the number of people you may have on the trip and the duration of the trip, it's really not feasible to carry that amount of water weight. And although I've spoken to people from other states that mention highlighting the use of perennial springs, that's not really an option for a lot of areas of California where those do not occur. And the water body conditions may not be known in advance when you show up at a potential base camp or where you're planning on stop for lunch for what may be present at that water body. Next slide, please. So how does this relate to harmful algal blooms? Well, natural water sources, as Sarah highlighted, can contain both cyanobacterial cells and detectable cyanotoxins that may vary depending on the time of year, the water body conditions, or other environmental factors. Currently, there are no portable water systems that are certified to address all the potential cyanotoxins, as Sarah mentioned. The major toxin classes are microcystin nodularin, anatoxins, saxitoxins, and cylindrospermopsin, and are not certified for to be treating a raw water source. There is one existing certification process for drinking water treatment systems, and that is for microcystins only. It's primarily as a polishing for finished drinking water, and therefore it only requires testing the influent concentrations of 4 micrograms per liter. And as Sarah mentioned, for example, with Clear Lake, they had a hit of up to 160,000 microgram per liter. And that 4 microgram per liter is based on generally the highest concentration that's been detected in finished drinking water. The maximum effluent that's allowed through to meet this certification is that same 0.3 microgram per liter microcystins that Sarah mentioned is the US EPA health advisory for the sensitive population. And again, that's because this is considered an additional barrier for finished drinking water. And there's a link for that certification requirements described. Next slide, please. So why is this of concern? And what potential human exposures are we aware of that have occurred? Well, within the last year, the HAB-related illness work group has received 2 notifications about individuals ingesting water after using these systems. In both those cases, there were samples collected from the water source from which they were pumping and filtering. And there was detected cyanobacteria and cyanotoxins in that water. In the first instance, it was a group of individuals. A subset of them exhibited symptoms that were consistent with harmful algal bloom exposure, but some of the group was asymptomatic. In the second report, it was a single individual that ingested the water, and they did not report symptoms at the time of the initial call, but we are continuing to follow up. Next slide. So what opportunities do we see to conduct further outreach and try to mitigate some of the potential exposures that could occur in these scenarios? Well, we'd like to continue increasing the general awareness around hikers and backpackers of this potential for drinking water exposure in this situation. We always recommend awareness of how to identify a potential harmful algal bloom in a natural water body. Identifying options of how you may be able to reduce potential exposure by being aware of not pumping water from a cloudy or discolored water. If it is clear water, there's a potential still for benthic cyanobacteria, so we'd recommend not disturbing the bottom, not trying to stir that up. and not entraining any potential cyanobacteria into the filter itself. We also want to continue existing outreach for the direct consumption of water from those water sources. These individuals may have dogs with them, they may have pack animals that are drinking directly, and that could certainly be a risk for them as well. And then how to report if there is potential ingestion and any symptoms that develop. We would want to make sure people are aware of how to report any illnesses as exemplified for the past reporting. We'd like to continue supporting harmful algal bloom monitoring and response in areas that have these potential for high recreational use for hiking and backpacking. And we'd like to work with land managers in these areas if they're willing to post harmful algal bloom signage, such as the ones to the right, near trailheads and ranger stations. Oftentimes you might need to go to a ranger station to get a permit, to get information about trail conditions. And so we think this might be an opportunity to make the public more aware of what conditions may be at where they might be collecting drinking water. So that's my last slide. Happy to have questions at this point for either Sarah or myself. Thanks for this opportunity.
Hi, this is Ray. I got a quick clarification question. Is it that the portable filters don't filter out the bacteria itself, or are the toxins a product of the bacteria that gets past the filter?
Well, you can have both intracellular toxins, so toxins that are within the cells, and there is the potential that the cells could make it through. There's also the potential that in the process of doing the filtration that you may lyse the cells. And then these toxins are, small molecules and they could pass through. I should mention that also boiling water is not, while may help with the other types of bacteria, they will not mitigate the potential for toxins. So by reducing the volume of water, you might actually concentrate the toxins. So that's not a acceptable measure of trying to address these particular toxins.
And I assume the chlorine tablets don't work either.
Yes, and that's even the the example Sarah showed as well, that they were still getting the toxins even in an individual household system. But thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Thanks, Sarah. I had a question for both the Clear Lake residents and for backpackers. What are the, were the Clear Lake residents exhibiting symptoms? And then B, what are the symptoms that you would identify as potentially being associated with cyanotoxin poisoning?
My understanding is it's gastrointestinal distress and flu-like symptoms. And actually, as part of year 2 of the CalWatch project, the Tracking California folks are looking at our ambient water monitoring cyanotoxin data, as well as emergency room visits for those symptoms that have been reported, to see if there's any spikes during the high toxin levels.
Thank you.
And I would just clarify, so there's, or just add to what Sarah mentioned, there can be different types of impacts based on the toxins that are present. And there can also be a general irritant or allergic reaction. But there could be microcystin is a hepatotoxin, so it affects the liver. So you can have symptoms with that. You can have a dermal reaction, so you might have a rash or a skin irritation, eye irritation, that type of thing, or breathing issues. And then the anatoxins and saxitoxins are neurotoxins. So those could have different types of effects on the nervous system. So it can vary, but there could also be just a general GI or allergic irritation reaction as well. Thank you.
No, thank you, and thanks for providing the link. I know the information was there. It's just I feel like with the signage, that's the kind of the piece that it's hard to put on there. Like if you finish or you're experiencing these and then report them or think about this as the potential cause for them. to help identify where these might be an issue. Because I do a lot of backpacking, and I know I've seen it, and it directed my friends away from certain types of water body. But I think for the majority of people, they don't, or they assume that it's getting filtered out. So, any other questions?
Are these this sign that you mentioned, are those available and posted anywhere, or this just a proposed sign? I mean, it looks good. Like, that would certainly get my attention if I saw it posted at Trailhead.
Yes, these are all part of the California's voluntary guidance for recreational water bodies. And so we do have the general awareness signs, which the blue sign below is for benthic, and there's another sign for water column or planktonic blooms. So those can be posted at any time, and then the caution signs would be posted if there is information, either visual observations or samples showing the toxin levels. But this is a voluntary monitoring, and there are a few water bodies that have ongoing recreational monitoring, such as Clear Lake. So there's certainly an opportunity to do more, and we encourage anyone who does see what they consider to be a potential HAB to report that, and certainly we will try to follow up on that. So I can also put the report a bloom link in there, but that's definitely another way to make sure we understand what's happening out there. Thank you.
No, thank you. And you make up a good point. It's funny you asked that question, Ray, but the CCHAB network has been one of the most successful work groups of the council, and they have all sorts of great information on their portal and websites, not only the incident reporting response module, which they presented on, or I had some of the FHAB folks present to the national level, but they put together all the signage with, it's been a great effort. So that I encourage you to point your sector towards these. There's some questions in there about sharing the presentation, but also Keith Bowman-Gregson asked about Clear Lake. Was the tap water discolored in any way? And did you do any cell counts on the number of cyanobacterial cells in the tap water?
Yeah, so I answered in the chat as well, but we did not do cell counts, but the microscopy we did do in-house, and most of the tap water was clear, although some of it did have visible turbidity, and actually some of them even sitting in the fridge developed a green, developed cyanobacteria on the top, sort of like what the lake does, but most of them were clear by the eye. We also did chlorine residual testing at every sample, so we have that as well. And a lot of them were had levels of chlorine. Most of them had levels of chlorine.
Well, great. I'm not seeing any other questions, but thank you so much for taking the time. Great information. Okay, well, that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. So the last item here is really to talk about our next meeting, which is May 26th of this year. I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's also going to be virtual, but if that changes, we can adjust. But I would assume at this point that it's going to be a virtual and likely an abbreviated style meeting similar to this one. Some potential topics, one that was not on the original agenda, but came up in the interim, in a presentation on the integrated report. So I was approached by the DWQ staff, Department of Water Quality staff, if we would, the council at large, be interested in hearing a report on the a presentation on the integrated report, some of the advancements they've been making. They've been doing a lot of great work since Lori Weber took over on visualizing the data. They've done some new integrated report mapping. they've done some interesting or some new updates on how they're assessing for certain pollutants. And being that the council, initially was created in an effort to increase transparency in the integrated report, and a lot of the work groups were designed with the integrated report originally in mind, I thought it would be a good idea, but I wanted to pose it to the council to see if that'd be of interest to you all. They seemed willing.
I am obviously biased, but I'll put a plug in for having the discussion, because I think there's some data, both thresholds, display, and quality items that I think would be interesting for discussion at this group.
Yeah, this is Brian Lawrence, and I'd definitely be interested in that agenda item.
Great.
Yeah, definitely a lot of interest from the regulated stormwater community on that presentation. That's for sure. Nick and Karen, I think it's a great topic.
Okay, great. Then I will pursue that one for sure, since I know that they're on board with that.
Hey, Nick, this is Terry. I'm just, there's many aspects of the integrated report. Is it just, what we did last summer, or is it, the future one, or is it more programmatic in nature?
I think they're open to focusing it on what the council members want to hear. My initial thoughts was it would be more about the updates to not necessarily specifically the integrated report for a given year, but the changes to the process, like how are things being assessed differently in the past. Karen mentioned different thresholds. How is the data and the assessments being visualized differently than they were in the past? Advances in their R tool for the creation of lines of evidence, that sort of thing.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Stuff that's applicable. Oh, sorry. And Lori is here too, if she wants to chime in on some ideas, but she's happy to hear suggestions from you all if there are specific topics or areas within the integrated report you want to hear. That way she could tailor it to.
Nick, I think this is a great topic, and I'll even go so far as that I think we could devote an entire meeting to it. Because, well, I think it's a lot more than simply hearing an update. I think that there's almost like three pieces to this puzzle. There's are the data being collected with appropriate quality? The second is, are the data finding their way into a database that's easy to use or has the appropriate data? And then the third is, do we have good thresholds by which we're making decisions? I think that actually parallels very well with a lot of the things the council deals with. And it would be great to hear from Lori, what does she see as the biggest impediment in putting together the report? Is it mostly the data comes in very poor shape and she can't figure out which data to use? Is it the data's not coming at all because the data systems are so bad? Or is it something like ocean acidification where we don't really have a threshold yet and trying to figure out how to deal with it? It'd be kind of nice to go through all the parameters and kind of go which ones are in good shape and which ones are not. And it's a lot of work for Lori to put together, but I think the council would gain a lot from hearing that kind of status update. It would help us define where we want to go into the future with our actions to help support that.
So I will commit to working with Lori and the team to come up with an agenda that, I don't want to divert my staff to a huge effort to just present this. They are really strapped with keeping this thing on time. So they're already in the middle of 2024 and getting ready to solicit data for 2026. So with that in mind, I will work with my staff to come up with an agenda. I actually think, Steve, you're spot on in terms of there are some big picture topics that come from doing an integrated statewide assessment across beneficial uses and pollutants that is absolutely relevant to the discussion at this council. So, I think we can come up with a good presentation, and I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and be part of the team and craft something that'll be useful. We'll also work on sort of how much time we will need. And if it's a half-day meeting like this, I agree with you that we could probably take up the whole agenda. And I don't hear Lori or Anna Maria screaming at me.
They both passed out.
I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if
Yeah,
you
we
guys
can
can hear me. This is Laurie.
Right.
Yeah, half day sounds reasonable. Full day is a little scary. But
Yeah.
thanks Steve, for your great suggestions. And that's kind of along the lines of what I was thinking too. We would like to kind of showcase some of the visualization tools that we've had and definitely talk about what the greatest impediments are. So
Well, and how the
that.
council can help us.
Yeah.
Is where I want to go. But yeah, thanks, Lori, for chiming in.
Okay, thanks.
Well, pending that item taking up the rest of the items, I've also had some meeting with the wetland work group tomorrow to talk about their strategic planning. I know that they want to engage the council, so that might be a potential item depending on how the IR presentation rolls out, as well as the next steps for the environmental flows work group. They have at this point, as you saw, basically have a final draft or a draft version of the California Environmental Flows Framework, which is what the initial task for that work group was. Now they're looking to the future. You know, the next steps really for the CEF are for the water board to see it and do what they're going to do with it officially, but the work group itself is still moving forward with use cases and next steps. So they would like to share that with the council. I don't think that's as pressing as important across work groups as the integrated report is. The wetland likewise, it just kind of get your input on what they're thinking as they re-strategize how that work group is moving forward. Josh Collins is retired, so they're looking at getting a new co-chair that represents that sector, and also just trying to relook at how that work group is operating and wanting to move forward. And then lastly was the kind of a process update on AB 1066, since at that point May revise should be out, might have a better picture of how we will start knocking off the milestones that are identified in AB 1066, the first of which would be July 1 to have a work group in place. And then I'm open to any other ideas that you may have. So if you can voice them now or shoot me an email, since we are over time from the agenda. Okay. Going once, going twice. All right, everybody. Thank you. Great meeting, and be in touch, and I will follow up with the recording and everything that we all do. So thanks again for all the presentations and your participation.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.